Apple were so close. So the Apple event just wrapped up, and not only have they announced the brand new iMacs, but we also have a bunch of other updates, including a brand new iPad Pro, as well as a purple iPhone, AirTag, a bunch of stuff to talk about. But we've got to address the elephant in the room. That iMac is, well, not exactly what I was expecting. So you've got to consider that the current iMac has been around for a very long time, right? That sort of aesthetic has been there for, what, like 10 years now or something at this point? And this is the first time that they've fully redesigned it. Now, on one hand, that's great. Now, the colors, I will say immediately, I am a huge fan of. It really kind of brings me back to those like old school iMac G3 days. But then there's the Chen. Okay, look. The iMac has had a Chen for a long time, that's fine. But one of the big advantages with this new iMac is the fact that it is running the M1 processor, which is of course shared with the MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, Mac Mini, now the iPad Pro, as well as the iMac. Now it's important to keep in mind that this iMac is not probably the last of the iMacs we'll see. This is a 24-inch iMac, which is very much a replacement for the previous 21.5-inch. There will 100%, without a doubt, be a bigger 27 or 32-inch iMac coming later this year, probably with an upgraded processor, kind of a little bit more along the lines of something like an iMac Pro. So just let's keep in mind as we talk about this with all the bright colors and everything, this iMac is probably not for me. It might not be for you. It is definitely for someone who is looking for a desktop that's sort of more of a casual all-in-one and not something which is a hardcore gaming and editing powerhouse. What really jumps out to me though is that Chen. So look, this thing is very thin. So I think they said it was something like what, 11.5 millimeters thin, which is very thin. And unlike the previous iMac, which looked really thin on the side, but kind of like tapered out, so there was almost a little bit of an optical illusion, this is actually just 11 millimeters thin all the way through. Very cool for a desktop, but essentially it's all display. Right? So the reason that Chen exists, especially if you look at some of the images that they showed during the press conference, really goes to show that that bottom is all about the speakers, the two very small fans to keep the M1 cool, and the logic board, which, to be fair, is hilariously small, but really the thinness there, I think, is entirely down to the actual display that they've got. Now, it is a Retina 4.5K display, which again is nice, right? The previous base model 21-inch iMac was still using like a 1080p or just, it wasn't even Retina yet. So obviously the display is going to be nice, but I kind of feel like they missed a little bit of an opportunity here. Yes, they could have made the entire thing, what, 3 or 4 millimeters thicker, put all of the components on the inside, and then completely gotten rid of that bottom bezel. But instead, they made it look very thin from the side, but you're looking at the computer not from the side most of the time, you're looking at it from the front. And from the front, you've got yourself a very large Chen. Now I'll say that I personally don't mind the fact they've taken the Apple logo off of that and moved it around to the back. I actually put a Twitter poll out during the event to see what people thought, and it's pretty damn close to 50-50 on people who like the new iMac design versus don't. But I just can't help but feel that there was a little bit of something that they missed there by making it just a little bit thicker and getting rid of that Chen, right?
And also the fact that Austin is not an engineer and maybe there was other reasons why.
No, you could just make it thicker. You know that they could have just made it thicker and it would have been just fine. The other thing that I think is a little bit controversial are the bezels. They're white. A la what, like 2013 iPhone status? Look, this is the point. I don't know if you're gonna disagree. I do not like the white bezels.
I love them a lot.
I hate them.
Look, white bezels are not the move. White bezels are not the move, okay? Now, inside the new iMac, it is of course very similar to all of the other M1 Macs, right? So you're looking at the M1 processor, and just like with the MacBook Air, there are a couple of configurations. So there's a 7-core GPU as the base model at $1299, and then there's the 8-core GPU with more storage and RAM and all that kind of stuff, which you can start to upgrade to. But the pricing is fine, right? I don't think the pricing is all that unusual, but they've made some really interesting decisions here. So first of all, it has 4 USB-C ports. That's basically it. Now, 2 of these are Thunderbolt enabled, which makes sense because all of the M1 Macs have a limitation of only 2 Thunderbolt displays, or Thunderbolt ports, and on top of that, you can only run 1 additional display, right? That's just a limitation of it. It does have a headphone jack on the left side of the border, but probably the more interesting decision is the power cable. So it is color matched with the computer, and you'll see as with the rest of the accessories, everything is gonna be color matched, which is a nice touch. So it's magnetic, but it's an external power brick. Now that external power brick, just like the old Chromecast, actually has your Ethernet port built in. Yeah, I guess, I mean, I would have preferred probably to have it on the back of the system, but I guess it is helpful for cable management to kind of tuck your Ethernet on the bottom. At least they still have an Ethernet cable. However, when you bump up to the $14.99 version, you get all the colors, you get the Touch ID keyboard, and you also get the higher end specs, and you get the better GPU. Realistically though, I feel like most people who are purchasing an iMac, they're not doing it for hardcore professional use, right? I mean, they were talking way more about Apple Arcade than they were talking about Photoshop or DaVinci Resolve, which makes sense. What I really want to see personally is the iMac Pro, the iMac 32-inch, whatever the bigger version of this is, right? You put the more powerful like M1X or M2 in it, I think this thing is gonna be seriously powerful. Now, that being said, I do use a 13-inch MacBook Pro as my daily. I'm editing this video on the 13-inch MacBook Pro right now with the M1. It is very powerful. But the thing is, when you look at what this iMac is, it's essentially a Mac Mini with a very nice display. Right? Which is fine. When you look at the price difference, especially if you're trying to buy a 4.5K display, it actually isn't unreasonably priced in my opinion. But it's hard to get excited about with the design, which personally, I mean, this event just wrapped up. 3 days from now, I might look at it and go, oh, this is amazing, but I mean, it's just a big chen. There's nothing going on down there besides that's where they're hiding all of the components. So it's a little bit of an unusual decision. Now, what makes the iMac a little bit more of an interesting decision is the fact that it shares that M1 chip with the now brand new iPad Pro. Now, as Timmy Cook so helpfully showed us how to break into Apple security, it's kind of weird that this very thin iPad has the exact same chip as the iMac, which needs that big chen to include it. A little bit strange. Now, the M1 here is very similar to what you're gonna find on the MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, and everything. The main difference is, of course, the iPad does not have any fans to cool it, so you're likely gonna be losing a little bit of performance, but also it's running iPad OS, so you're probably not really gonna notice unless you spend your life inside of Geekbench. And you do now also get Thunderbolt on the iPad. You get other stuff too, like 2 times faster storage, you get up to a 2 terabyte SSD, but the real question for me is, what are you going to do with this, right? They made a big deal about all the things you can do with iPad Pro. And don't get me wrong, there are certainly some major things that are very unique with like the AR space, and you have stuff like Photoshop, and you can do video editing on the iPad, but I still find the iPad to be in a little bit of a weird space right now, right? Where the M1 Max do so much so well, where exactly does the Pro and the iPad Pro come in? Sure, it has a lot of features, but I think about it, and 95% of the time, I would rather use a full laptop that has the exact same specs, except well, let's put it really frankly, a more powerful operating system in macOS versus iPadOS. Now, they did talk about how with that Thunderbolt port, you can run like a Pro Display XDR at 6K, which is great, but as of right now, the iPad doesn't really allow you to do a whole lot with that second display. Sure, certain apps will support, like throwing your video up as you're editing it on the main display or something like that, but it's very limited. Now, in a few months at WWDC, if they do show off the ability for iPadOS to have like multiple windows and you can actually take advantage of an external display, that will make a lot more sense. But where I struggle with the iPad Pro is just, it's a lot more power, but I mean, this thing is what, 2-3 years old at this point, and it still is incredibly powerful as is, right? There's no other tablet that touches it, and I can't think of a single thing that I do on a daily basis that I need more power for on an iPad, which sounds strange because I always like more power, but like, they're selling this thing to professionals, but they don't really have the tools really that are going to make that useful. Now, to be fair, the new 12.9-inch iPad Pro, so not the 11-inch, the larger variety, does have a mini LED display, which is admittedly very cool looking, right? 1,000 nits of brightness, almost double the previous iPad. You've got 10,000 mini LEDs behind the display versus 72 on the last, so essentially it means that it is incredibly bright, it's got great contrast. This is cool. But again, I mean, look, I love the 120 hertz on this display, and sure, it's not super visible outside, but I look at something like this and like it's a nice upgrade, but it doesn't fundamentally change what an iPad is, and it certainly doesn't fundamentally change what you can do with an iPad Pro. There's also a white smart keyboard, which I think looks great for the first 7 seconds that you use it. There's also 5G on the new iPad Pro, which is cool, right? I'll give them that, but realistically, this is a spec bump iPad, right? The real upgrades for the iPad Pro, I really do believe are going to be in software. In a couple months, we'll see what they've got for iPadOS 14 when it comes to WWDC, but as of right now, solid, decent upgrade, but for me personally, I don't see any reason to upgrade an iPad Pro, right? It just doesn't do a lot for me over the 2018 or the 2019 version that you may already have right now. That being said, what is absolutely worthy of an upgrade is a new purple iPhone. That's literally all I have to say. There's a purple iPhone 12 now, it's very purple, and I think it looks very good. Now there were some other things, including the finally announced AirTag, which essentially is a little Bluetooth tracker that is similar to something like a Tile. This has been rumored for years now, and it's actually pretty cool looking. You can engrave it. It uses the U1 chip on your iPhone to track things down, and it'll run you a solid $29. I didn't have to look that up at all. It'll be great for Ken when he loses his keys every 15 seconds.
It's true.
There's also an upgrade Apple TV, which has a better processor. There are a couple of cool features here, including a brand new remote, which looks to be much better, as well as you have a very cool feature which will allow you to use your iPhone to actually do all the calibration of your TV through the Apple TV, right? So you put your phone up to the TV, it'll do everything to get the color just right, at least when you're watching stuff through the Apple TV, which makes sense because realistically, let's face it, who's spending $180 or $200 on a set-top box these days, right? I mean, personally for me, I use the built-in WebOS on my LG Smart TV. I don't even have anything plugged in. But that being said, if you're gonna spend the extra money to get an Apple TV, it makes sense to give it as many features as possible. If you wanna get your hands on any of the new upgrades, the purple iPhone as well as AirTag will be available on April 30th, and that same day you will also be able to pre-order the new Apple TV, iMac, as well as the brand new iPad Pros, and all of those will ship in the second half of May. I'm very curious, what do you think about these new Apple upgrades? For me, iPad seems fine, but the iMac is really where I want to love it, but it feels like it's so close.